Rain sheeted across the narrow Brooklyn street, glistening under fractured neon. The deli's blue sign buzzed faintly, flickering like it was nervous. A car door slammed, sharp, final. My boots splashed toward the noise, heart pounding a beat too fast. A gunshot cracked the night open, echoing off wet brick and rusted fire escapes. I froze, breath frosting the air. Ahead, Joey's body sprawled beside the curb, crimson spiraling into the gutter. My knees hit the pavement before I even knew I'd fallen. The crucifix around his neck was warm, slick with his blood. Sirens wailed far off, too far to matter. "Stay with me, Joey," I said, voice breaking in the cold. He didn't answer. Somewhere above, a window slammed shut. I could feel eyes on me, the kind that weigh your soul. Fingers numb, I slipped the crucifix into my pocket. Oh! The shadows seemed to tighten, like the street was folding in around me. Brooklyn had always been cruel, but tonight it felt personal. And I knew this wasn't random. This was a message. The rain followed me into the funeral parlor, soaking the carpet with each step. Every handshake felt like a test, every hug an interrogation. The boss stood near the casket, voice smooth as silk over glass shards. His eulogy was warm, tender, and laced with poison I could taste. "Joey was family," he said, looking right at me. The crowd nodded, tears real enough to sell the show. When I stepped forward to pay respects, his hand clamped mine, slipping a folded note into my palm. "Meet me at the club, midnight." His smile never wavered. I tucked the note away, pulse quickening. In this room, grief was just another performance, and I wasn't sure if I was mourning Joey or the man I used to be. Midnight draped itself over the city like a velvet shroud. The club's neon sign glowed red, cutting through the mist. Inside, bass thumped slow and heavy, bodies moving like shadows. The boss sat in his usual corner booth, flanked by silent muscle. His smile was almost genuine. "You've been asking questions," he said, voice low enough to be drowned by music. I sipped the whiskey set before me, letting the burn remind me I was still alive. "Joey deserved better," I replied. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but calculation. Every word here was a gamble, and I was stacking my chips in blood. The whispers started after that meeting. In back alleys, in the pauses between jukebox songs, my name slid through the city like a rumor with teeth. A detective, badge tarnished by time and bribes, found me leaning against a diner wall. "You're swimming in deep water," he said, lighting a cigarette with hands that had seen too much. I told him I could handle myself. He smirked. "Sure you can, but even sharks drown." His offer of help came with the kind of price tag that bleeds you slow. The city felt different now, like the bricks themselves were listening. Every shadow hid an echo of Joey's last breath. I sat in my apartment, blinds half closed, listening to the hum of the radiator. The crucifix lay on the table, catching the faint glow of a street lamp. I thought about walking away. But in my world, walking away just paints a target on your back. Somewhere out there, someone decided Joey's life was worth less than silence. I wasn't going to let that stand. The detective's warning rattled in my head as I walked the narrow stretch of pier where Joey and I used to meet. Fog rolled off the water, swallowing the skyline. A figure leaned against the railing. The confidant. Her leather jacket glistened under the mist, eyes sharp, but voice soft. "You're chasing something that'll burn you alive," she said, flicking ash into the black water. I told her I wasn't looking for safety. She sighed, a sound equal parts pity and anger. "Then at least know who's holding the match." Her gaze cut toward the city, where lights blurred through the fog like a memory trying to disappear. I knew she wouldn't have called me here unless the truth was close and dangerous. We ducked into a corner booth at a waterfront dive, the air thick with salt and stale beer. She laid it out like a confession. The boss had been moving heroin through the docks for months, using Joey to keep it quiet. When Joey found out the shipments were dirtier than usual, cut with poison, he threatened to expose it. "That's why he was dead. You were loyal to the wrong king," she said, eyes locking on mine. I gripped my glass until it trembled. Every part of me wanted to storm his office that second. Wow. But rage without proof was just suicide. The next day, I walked the docks like I belonged there. Crates stacked like towers, forklifts moving slow under the gray sky. I slipped into a warehouse while the foreman's back was turned. Inside, the air reeked of diesel and something sharper. I pried open a crate, bricks wrapped in plastic, stamped with a black lotus. Proof. But footsteps echoed behind me. The detective stood in the doorway, cigarette dangling. "You've got a knack for finding trouble," he said. I hid the brick under my coat. He didn't stop me. He just smiled. Like maybe we were on the same side, or maybe I'd just made his job easier. That night, the boss hosted a charity gala in the old opera house, a palace of gold and shadows. I slipped through the crowd in a borrowed tux, eyes fixed on him as he charmed senators and priests alike. The brick under my jacket felt like a live grenade. The confidant brushed past, whispering, "Careful, he smells blood." The chandelier's light scattered over the polished marble, blinding for a moment. When my vision cleared, the boss was looking right at me, smiling like we were the only two people in the room. After the gala, I waited in the alley behind the opera house, tux jacket damp from the drizzle. The boss's car pulled up, gleaming black under the streetlight. He stepped out, adjusting his cufflinks, alone for once. I stepped forward, the brick in my hand like a verdict. "You know what this is," I said. His smile didn't falter. "I know you're smart enough not to use it." His eyes were calm, like he'd already decided my fate. I realized then that in his game, even holding the winning card didn't mean you'd leave the table alive. Morning brought no mercy, only a gray sky pressing on the roofs like a fist. I felt eyes on me from stoops and windows, the city pretending to yawn. A kid courier slipped a matchbook into my palm and ran. Inside, a number was scrawled with a threat that smelled like cheap ink. "Back off the docks," it read, and the letters bled where the rain kissed them. I laughed without humor and kept walking. The crucifix tapped my ribs like a metronome set to war. The detective appeared from an alley and lit a cigarette. "Warnings mean you're close?" the detective said, smoke curling like a question. "Or already dead," I said, and his grin faltered. Fear moved under my skin but refused to surface. I had Joey's ghost ahead of me and a city of liars behind me. The number led me to a midtown coffee shop that hid suits the way churches hide sins. A broker with shark eyes stirred his espresso and never looked at me. The confidant slid into the seat beside me, leather jacket creaking like a warning. "Your boss launders through their fund," the confidant said, voice low and steady. She passed me account numbers that smelled like old money and bleach. The broker smiled at the window and pretended to see none of it. "You want justice or headlines?" she asked, chin lifted. "Justice," I said, though it tasted like smoke. She nodded once, as if that answer cost her something. The room hummed with ambition and caffeine, while storms gathered in our pockets. I understood the message. Blood was only the preface. The ledger ink would be the knife. By dusk I was inside a boiler room office above the exchange, where phones never stopped begging. Screens bled numbers that pulsed like a fever behind smoked glass. I cracked a filing cabinet and found ledgers stamped with the black lotus. The detective watched from the door, thumbs hooked in his belt like a tired priest. "You really want to marry this evidence," the detective said, eyes half amused. "Till death do us part," I said, and kept flipping pages. Wires to shell companies crossed oceans like desperate prayers. The boss's name never appeared, yet every arrow pointed to his throne. I snapped photos until my hands shook. Somewhere below, the market closed, and the building exhaled. In that sigh I heard how money forgives anything it can price. We met in a laundromat that sang with tired machines and coin clatter. The confidant kept her back to the wall, and her hands around a paper cup. "There's a drop tonight," the confidant said, eyes tracing the rotating glass. She gave me a location on the river and a schedule written like a prayer. "You sure?" I asked, hearing the caution under her breath. "I'm sure I'm done running," she said, jaw set against old ghosts. I wanted to thank her, but gratitude felt fragile here. Instead, I checked my spare magazine and studied the exits. "If this goes wrong," the confidant said, voice barely a thread, "don't come back for me." I promised nothing and meant everything. The dryers spun like clocks winding down. The riverfront warehouse slept under a bruise-colored sky. I slipped between stacked pallets and listened to rain tangle with the river. A van idled near a loading bay while men unwrapped crates with careful hands. The Black Lotus stamped the plastic like a blessing for wolves. I lifted my camera and felt the cross bite my chest. Then a flashlight burned the dark clean. "Drop it," a voice barked, too calm to be new at this. I turned slow and counted 3 shapes plus a silhouette above. One of them smiled like he wanted to remember my face. I lunged sideways as the first shot cracked and kissed steel. "Run!" the confidant yelled from the catwalk, and the night tore open. The warehouse erupted like a war waking mid-dream. Bullets chewed through wood and steel, while rain sprayed in from the open bay. I rolled behind a stack of crates, breath burning in my throat. The confidant fired from the catwalk, her jacket snapping like a flag in the wind. One man dropped, another shouted orders in a language that didn't belong here. The detective appeared in the shadows, gun drawn, expression unreadable. "Pick a side," he yelled over the noise. My finger tightened on the trigger without thinking. Somewhere in the chaos the van's engine roared to life. The Lotus bricks were getting away. Fear wasn't the weight in my chest, it was the certainty that this night would end in blood I couldn't wash off. The van skidded out of the bay, tires shrieking on wet asphalt. I broke cover and ran, boots slapping puddles, gunshots sparking off steel around me. The driver glanced in the mirror, eyes wide. I was closer than he thought. The confidant's voice cut through the rain, "Don't!" But it was too late. My hand found the latch, ripping the back doors open mid-turn. Lotus bricks spilled onto the street like rotten treasure. One man lunged at me, knife flashing. We crashed into the asphalt, pain blooming in my ribs. Sirens wailed somewhere distant, but here the only sound was the storm and our breath, ragged as torn paper. I came to with blood in my mouth, and the smell of gasoline. The van was gone, the bricks too. The detective stood over me, cigarette glowing in the rain. "You're lucky they wanted you alive," he said, voice flat as a morgue drawer. I pushed myself up, every joint screaming. "Then, they don't know me," I spat. He flicked his cigarette into the gutter, the ember dying in a hiss. "The boss knows everything," he replied, walking away into the fog. I watched him vanish, unsure if he'd saved me or just handed me back to the wolves. Somewhere in the distance, the city breathed like it was in on the joke. The confidant patched my ribs in her tiny apartment, the air thick with antiseptic and cigarette smoke. "You're playing a game where everyone cheats," she said, hands steady despite the tremor in her voice. I told her I wasn't playing. I was ending it. She stopped, looked at me like I'd just written my own obituary. "Then you need to hit him where it hurts," she said, sliding a folded paper across the table. "Bank accounts, shell companies, offshore havens, the boss's skeletons laid out in ink." My hands shook as I took it. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a map to the throne. I stood on a rooftop overlooking the city, the dossier heavy in my pocket. Lights stretched to the horizon, each one a debt the boss collected in fear. The rain had eased, leaving the air sharp enough to cut. Somewhere down there he was laughing at his empire, believing it untouchable. I thought of Joey, of the crucifix, of every handshake that had been a blade. The wind caught my coat like a sail, pulling me toward the edge. Tomorrow, the game would change. I didn't know if I'd win, but I knew he'd bleed before it was over. I walked into the bank like I belonged there, rain still dripping from my coat. The dossier in my pocket was a bomb no one could see. The teller's smile was painted on, her eyes darting to the suited man at the back. I handed over a withdrawal slip for an account that shouldn't exist. Her fingers hesitated over the keys, and I saw the pulse in her throat jump. A door buzzed open behind her, and 2 security men stepped out. I didn't flinch. "Tell your boss I'm making a withdrawal on his behalf," I said, voice steady. She froze, then slid me a thick envelope like it might bite her. Outside, the rain swallowed me whole. I'd just stolen from the king, and the city felt it. By nightfall, the confidant's apartment was lit only by the red glow of the radio scanner. We spread the money and documents across her table like an autopsy. "Hell no, it was you before you finish counting," she said, eyes scanning for something she didn't want to find. I told her that was the point. She leaned back, rubbing her temples. "You're either a genius or suicidal." I didn't correct her. The scanner crackled with chatter. Patrol cars shifting toward the docks. We locked eyes, and the unspoken truth hung between us. This was the last quiet hour we'd have. The docks were nearly empty when we arrived, just the slap of water against pilings and the hum of a lone generator. I hid in the shadow of a shipping container, camera ready. Headlights split the dark. A convoy of black SUVs rolled in. The boss stepped out, suit immaculate despite the weather, flanked by men whose eyes never stopped moving. A crate was opened, and inside were not drugs but weapons, military grade, stamped for export. This was bigger than heroin. I felt the lens tighten on him as his smile widened, unaware I was already stealing the moment that could bury him. I uploaded the photos from a rented room above a bodega, the walls sweating with steam from the kitchen below. The files crawled toward an encrypted server, each percentage a step closer to war. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. "You're making mistakes," the detective's voice said, almost sad. "Mistakes that can't be unmade." I asked if he was warning me or himself. Silence. Then, a click. Outside, a black sedan idled at the curb. I killed the lights, my shadow shrinking against the wall. The upload hit 100%, touched away. No turning back. The confidant met me in the alley behind the old movie theater, her breath fogging in the cold. "They're coming for you," she said, not as a warning, but as fact. I told her I'd rather they come now. She shook her head. "You don't get it, they're not coming to kill you, they're coming to buy you." My stomach turned. This was the offer I knew would come, the one that made traitors out of saints. Her hand brushed mine for the briefest moment. "Oh, don't sell your soul cheap," she whispered. The streetlight above flickered, and somewhere far off, a siren wailed like the city already knew my answer. The call came at midnight, a location, no explanation. I followed it to a shuttered meatpacking plant on the edge of the river. Inside, the air was colder than the night, thick with the stink of rust and old blood. The boss waited at the far end of the room, hands clasped behind his back like a man posing for a portrait. "You've made a mess," he said, voice calm, almost fatherly. I kept my coat closed, my gun heavy against my ribs. "You taught me well," I replied. His smile tightened. "Then you know what happens next." The sound of footsteps surrounded me. I counted at least 6, maybe more. The crucifix at my chest felt heavier than lead. The boss circled me slowly, like a wolf testing a cage. "We can fix this," he said, voice low, "but you have to let go of your crusade." I didn't move. "You killed Joey," I said, each word a nail. His eyes didn't flinch. "Joey was reckless. You're smart. That's the difference." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I'm offering you a seat at the table." Around us the footsteps paused, a silent audience. I thought of the dossiers, the photos, the weapons. A seat at the table was just another way of saying shackles in gold. The detective stepped out of the shadows, his badge glinting faintly in the half-light. "Maybe take the deal," he said, not smiling for once. My jaw tightened. "You working for him now?" I asked. He shrugged. "I work for whoever's still breathing." The boss smirked. See? Even your friends understand the rules. The detective's eyes met mine, and in them I saw the faintest flicker of something, warning or regret. My hands slid inside my coat. The room went still. The first shot shattered the silence. I dove behind a steel table as the echoes crashed through the plant. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like lightning in a storm. The confidant's voice rang out from somewhere above. Move! I rolled to my feet, firing toward the shadows. The boss ducked behind a pillar, barking orders. The detective returned fire, but I couldn't tell which side he was aiming at. The smell of gunpowder and metal wrapped the air in a suffocating grip. I chased the boss through a maze of hanging chains and dripping pipes, our footsteps echoing like war drums. He moved fast for his age, but desperation makes the body lighter. We burst onto the loading dock, rain hitting our faces like needles. He turned, gun in hand, breathing hard. Last chance, he said. My own gun was steady, my heart less so. No, I told him. This is the first. For a second, the world narrowed to the space between us. Then the rain swallowed the sound of the shot. The shot echoed across the dock, swallowed quickly by the rain, leaving only the hiss of water against steel. The boss staggered backward, a hand pressed to his chest, eyes wide as though shocked the world would dare end him. His gun slipped from his grip, clattering across the slick pavement. He sank slowly, knees folding under him, until his back hit the cold ground. You could have been me, he rasped, his voice ragged, eyes locked on mine as though the force of his will could still pull me in. I stepped closer, each footstep splashing in the shallow puddles between us. The crucifix was cold in my palm, its weight grounding me in the moment. That's the problem, I said, voice low, steady. He coughed, a wet final sound, and the light in his eyes dimmed. The dock lights hummed overhead, their mechanical buzz filling the silence like a cheap funeral hymn. I turned away without looking back, boots carrying me toward the edge of the pier, away from the man I might have become. The detective leaned against his sedan under the flickering street lamp, smoke curling lazily from his cigarette. He didn't ask what happened, his eyes already had the answer. You just made yourself king of nothing, he said, tone dry, but not without a trace of pity. I stopped a few feet away, water dripping from my coat in steady beats. Better than being a servant to something rotten, I replied. His lips twitched into a humorless smile. Rotten's what keeps this city running. He flicked the cigarette into the gutter, the ember dying with a hiss. We'll see, he muttered, opening his door. I didn't move. You coming? He asked. I shook my head. Some roads you drive alone. The door shut, and the sedan's headlights cut through the rain before disappearing into the dark. I walked the streets until dawn threatened to break over the skyline. The city was quieter than I'd ever heard it, like it was holding its breath. Storefronts slept behind rolled-down grates, and the few passers-by moved like ghosts under umbrellas. Every window I passed reflected a stranger's face, mine but harder, sharper. A church bell rang somewhere in the distance, its chime echoing off the wet stone and glass. I stopped at the corner and pulled the crucifix from my pocket, the chain cold and damp, the metal worn smooth from years of Joey's hands. The weight of it pressed into my palm like a promise and a warning all at once. Somewhere behind the horizon, the sun was climbing, but here the shadows still ruled. The confidant found me leaning against the pier railing, the mist curling around us like a curtain. Her leather jacket was damp, strands of hair clinging to her face. It's done, she asked, voice low but steady. I nodded once. For now. She reached inside her jacket and pulled out a plain envelope, holding it out like it weighed 100 pounds. Then you'll want this. I took it, my fingers brushing hers for just a second. Inside were photographs, new shipments, new faces, the same game in different costumes. I flipped through them slowly, the rhythm of the waves below marking each revelation. So nothing changes, I said, half to myself. She looked out over the water, her profile sharp in the pale morning light. Not unless someone makes it. I walked to the pier's edge, the envelope tucked safely in my coat. The crucifix dangled from my fingers, swaying in the wind, its chain catching the first pale strands of daylight. Behind me, her footsteps faded into the city's heartbeat. Ahead, the fog swallowed the horizon whole, leaving only the sound of waves slapping against the wood. I closed my fist around the crucifix, the cold metal biting into my skin. My reflection in the water was fractured by ripples, pieces of a man I didn't fully recognize. The city wasn't fixed, not by a long shot. It just had one less tyrant at the top. A voice inside, quiet but unyielding, whispered the truth I already knew. In this city, the only oath that matters is the one you take with yourself. I turned and walked away, vanishing into the fog,